gorgeous spring day to you, my non-university graduate students. Glad to have you joining me today. Welcome to the Uncensored Unprofessor Premium Edition. Why am I not now getting the C19 vaccines, those injections? Today I want to think with you about the coronavirus vaccines and the reality of bias in science. Science is not the only way to make sense of reality, but the application of thought to materiality, science is an enormous blessing from God. It's especially a blessing when it's done in an excellent, objective manner. So thanks again for joining me today. Let's think together, laugh together, and maybe even disagree together. Here in late April 2021, we're now some 4 months into 3 different medications being distributed. Currently, according to National Public Radio, 26% of the American population has been vaccinated. So that means some 85 million Americans have been vaccinated or been injected, right? Because they're not technically, 2 of them are not technically vaccines. Intriguingly, you guys, polls show that 41% of the American population says it will not take the vaccine. 41%. And you can include me, at least for now, among that 41%. I think it's fascinating that among frontline workers, hospital nurses, EMTs, doctors, 49% say they will not get the vaccine. And I think that's a stark disconnect. It's fascinating to me, but I won't land and stop on that. I don't want to get detoured there. So, what do I have to say? First, God bless all you 85 million listening today who've been vaccinated. Good on you. God bless you and yours. You're helping us reach herd immunity, or if not that, you're helping us slow the transmission of the virus. And I mean it sincerely. Thanks. Am I planning on getting the vaccine? No, nada. Why? Well, before I explain myself, please know that by what I'm going to say, I'm not at all suggesting to you what you should do. Everybody has their own peculiarities, their own medical status, age, demographics, comorbidities, concerns, stories, ongoing studies of the issue, their own position. And me? I'm happy to allow for diversity on this. People should not be forced to get a vaccine for a virus that is, across all statistical fields, 98% survivable. And on the other side of that, people who want to get a vaccine should go and get it. You are up to you, and I'll do me. But I want to give you 6 reasons why I have no plans, at least again for the near future, of getting the vaccine. 6. Number 1, I don't believe the CDC reporting on COVID. Now, hear me out. Yes, I do believe there's a real virus. Duh. I personally know 7 people who've had the virus, and I have several friends who have had friends die from COVID. Yeah, it's real. There is a virus, and often it's a nasty virus. But I don't believe the numbers are as swollen as the CDC or, the major news networks. How often they report, every single hour of every day. I don't believe those numbers. And I'll come back in a moment to the media, but again, point number 1, I just don't believe the CDC's swollen numbers. And here's part of the CDC's problem. Hospitals and other institutions have been incentivized by the federal government to increase their number counts. FactCheck.org notes that every time someone is diagnosed or reported to have been diagnosed with a virus, the institution, that hospital, receives $13,000. Or if a diagnosed C19 patient is put on a ventilator, the hospital receives something between $30,000 to $40,000 additional from the federal government. That's a lot of moolah. That federal government Rona money, that all helps the bottom line at hospitals. Hospitals where the other 90% of their normal monthly patient loads through elective surgeries and the sort, that was all heavily reduced over the last year by the COVID hysteria. And money, especially big truckloads of it, always skews the data, always, on anything. Just think of how the cost of college tuition has soared over the last few decades, and it's because of the generosity, air quotes, of the federal government giving loan money. It just makes the cost of things go up. Anytime the government pumps truckloads of money into the economy, there are always, and I do mean always, Jerry, unintended consequences. CDC numbers include and reflect the swollen reporting from profit-incentivized frontline institutions. But still more on the CDC? The CDC changed their story too often for me to trust their voice. It won't be a big deal, epidemiologist Fauci said when 2020 broke. And then not long after that, please don't buy masks, he said early in the outbreak. Just remain 6 feet apart if you're indoors, it was then mandated. Then it was, the chief told us, remain 6 feet apart even if you're outside on a mountain trail. Then it was, stay home or we'll never flatten the curve. Then it was, wear 2 masks. No, 3 layers. Are you kidding me? Even the leftward-leaning Atlantic magazine reports that the CDC was, in the middle of last year, combining test numbers from those who presently have the disease with those who have had it in the past. Now, I think that that's sloppy at best, and it's disingenuous at worst. The CDC's reporting pattern for 14 months has been an embarrassing mess. In a freshman biology class, they'd get a big red F on their exam. Experts who score Fs don't foster trust. Me? I want excellence, not propaganda. Excellence fixes things, not propaganda. And the messy at best reporting from the CDC doesn't make me want to give them a big warm evangelical side hug. Trust is foundational. So the constant confusion caused me to no longer trust the CDC. And I don't believe all the reported deaths from COVID were actually caused by COVID. That someone died in a motorcycle accident but was later diagnosed as having the Rona in his system is not the same as saying he died of COVID. Or, in our family's case, that my 95-year-old aunt reportedly had COVID in her system when she died last year is not the same as saying C19 killed her. But that's how this was all counted. Suspicious CDC. For me, the CDC was, in hyper-sophisticated terms, a bad baddie. I don't believe the CDC. Hey, you guys, my premium supporters, thank you so much for your monthly contributions. You guys are a shot of encouragement in my daily arm. Seriously. Reason number 2 for me. This viral outbreak occurred in an election year. Election years have been, across my long adult life, rife with conspiracies, lies, fabrications, the tarnishing of candidates, the prevalence of October scandal surprises, news misreporting and disinformation, and pregnant all of that with propaganda. The American media is a wretched toilet of propagandistic bias. And with Donald Trump as president, that propaganda was increased by what? A factor of 4 or 5? There was lots much more nonsense being passed along about everything than I've ever observed. And no, I'm not going to get into a defense, some apology for Donald Trump. I'm just saying that the media swirl, the media hysteria, media mania, was running full steam ahead, especially because it was an election year. Our nation's future was at stake. Much of the media are left of center. That's no surprise to you. Studies have been showing that for over 40 years. But in the midst of an election year, the media had a determined agenda to boot Trump from office. And COVID helped them make that bump, thump, dump Trump. They were delighted, giddy even, to be able to nightly, daily, hourly report about how we're all going to die if we didn't stay sheltered at home until the curve was flattened. It was hysteria and hysterical. And the election year fomented that, exacerbated that hysteria by what? A factor of 4 or 5? Then that hysteria was used against Trump. Just by way of comparison, remember the horrid H1N1 viral outbreak in 2009? Remember how everyone was going crazy about the swine flu during the Obama presidency? Remember? Me neither. It was barely a radar blip. Why's that? It wasn't an election year. Cetas Sagradas. It didn't involve a president who was loathed by the progressives. The media didn't then report on H1N1 beyond a pimple on a rhino's back. Context matters. The election year blew this into hysteria. And for me, that's important how I'm reading the tea leaves of what's going on here. Reason number 3. The virus is 98.5% survivable. That's a greater survival rate than I was saying way back early on when this all broke. I was saying it would have a 97% survival rate. It's got a 98.5% survival rate. Now, yuck it. I could have made this my reason number 1. But why am I with no comorbidities? Well, I am technically overweight, and I'm also wondering, is bald a comorbidity? Does baldness make you more susceptible to things? Why am I with no comorbidities being asked to get inoculated for a virus that is 98.5% survivable? The math doesn't add up, doesn't compute for me. You do you. I won't push back. But it's survivable. And so for me that's a reason I'm not now considering getting the virus shot. Number 4. Alternatives to social distancing, masking up, were not only not considered as possibilities, the mention of those was positively banned and blocked both by the CDC and the Inquisition-style big tech wokerati. Think with me back across the year. Do you remember anyone from the CDC, Dr. Fauci, or his today this, tomorrow that partner, Rochelle Walensky? Do you remember them featured on a primetime news story who when they were encouraging and describing how we should be strengthening our immune systems? Think back on all that, right? No, me neither. I don't remember them ever one time standing up and encouraging us to strengthen our immune systems. What's an immune system? When I first heard an epidemiologist from here in Sugar Beet Central talk about doing that very thing, strengthening our immune systems, I was gobshited. How had I not thought of that myself? No encouragement about our immune systems? But how? How is that possible? Why only masks and social distancing? Because masks and social distancing, it reinforces fear. Strengthening immune systems is something doable, something constructive, positive. Positives didn't fit the reigning fear porn narrative. Oh, and then when any possible alternative for treating the batty flu was mentioned, not curing, but treating the batty flu, hydro, hydro, hydroxychloroquine, remdesivir, ivermectin, when anybody mentioned them, those were derided and poo-pooed. Even when doctors across the globe said they were having measurable success with the very cheaply priced hydroxychloroquine, they were shot down and mocked and banned. It was Inquisition style. Both the CDC and social media were positively canceling any and all alternatives to masking up and social distancing. But that's not how science works. And I'm going to get to bias in science in a minute. But every alternative was immediately and resolutely blasted with a shotgun. And that was a constant suspicion for me. Why? Why, if we're in a society-threatening pandemic, why oppose alternatives that seem to be working? Don't we want any and everything that works? I don't get it. It doesn't add up for me. Why rule out strengthening our immune systems or alternative treatments? It's strange. It really is weird for me. Here's my fifth reason, and it's a biggie for me. It doesn't need to be for you, but it is for me. The vaccines were rushed to the public. Now, I want you to hear me clearly. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I don't believe pharmaceutical companies are trying to program us through some mind-controlling vaccines. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. In fact, I'm kind of weird. I'm grateful for pharmaceutical companies. Without them, I myself would be dead. I survived a life-threatening automobile accident because of the sort of medical advances that pharmaceutical companies and other bioscience companies have bequeathed to us. But for me, these 3 vaccines were rushed to the public in an election year where the CDC was regularly changing its instructions, where alternative treatments were resisted getting entrance into the public square, where the virus itself is 98.5% survivable? Nope. No pharma karma juice for me. I want many much more externally conducted studies to be performed first. Studies that are not conducted by big pharma companies themselves. Studies not conducted in a season of suspicion. I want to know what the long-term effects are for a virus that's 98.5% survivable before I permit a rushed to the public in an election year foreign substance needled into my body. Like, I want to know what the percentages are for contracting eye cancer, or for it making you become a Yankee fan, or what if it causes you to grow a second spleen? I know that's silliness, but I want more careful studies. And finally, why me no get shot? Why I'm not taking one of the 3 vaccines, the treatments, the injections? Reason number 6. They're telling us that the vaccines are not 100% effective. Are you kidding me? Even having been vaccinated, there's still a chance I could contract the pangolin goo? Or a different variant, the kangaroo goo? I might still have to go and get another shot later? Or if I do get a vaccine, I will still have to wear a mask between the bites of my Panda Express meal? What am I What am I living in, a Salvador Dali painting? Why? Why the Why would I let them put something in my body if it doesn't ensure living a virus-free social existence? I'm so sorry, but for me it defies logic. I smell a rat. Either the vaccines work or they don't. And if they don't work, they're not vaccines. They might be treatments, but they're not vaccines. So, there are 6 reasons that feed into my personal decision. There's no single reason, but like I say, there is a pastiche, a pattern, or a series of patterned disconnects that inform my decision to abstain. And again, lest you think I'm being unfair, I pray this damnable virus and all the suffering and division it has caused, that it would all soon be over. Lord have mercy. Well, what about science and bias? And I'm raising this line of questioning precisely because of the Rona hysteria. I want to think with you about science and bias, and then I'm going to bring it back around full circle again to the C19 hysteria. First, you guys, we know that all scientists are biased. There's no pure objectivity. I mean, bias, it's a given. But what science itself has tried to ensure, say, for 500 years, is that scientists work beyond, move beyond, even report out their own biases. That's why science heretofore has demanded replication, external testing of a hypothesis, repeatability, staunch scrutiny. But still, of course, scientists have their own respective biases. We're just putting that on the table. Second, we know that science believes it can find answers, and that belief is itself a bias. And it makes sense to me, right? Because without that bias, there would be no motivation to do scientific work. But what that means is science is smoked through and through with belief. Now, that's not a weakness. But we do well to admit that science is smoked through and through with belief. Science is not based on pure reason. Science is based in and permeated by faith. My very first public series on faith and reason unpacks all of that at length. Science believes it can find answers. Thank you, science. Third, science, because of its limits, is only interested in the material world. It's heavily biased toward physical, observable realities. And this is a necessary boundary of science. It can only measure the tangible, the measurable, the recordable. So, for instance, it cannot measure or explain miracles. Miracles defy science, and sometimes science says miracles are not real since those don't fall within the capabilities of science. But dismissing miracles that way would be like a chef who says music is not real since she, the chef, cannot list off the tactile ingredients that get baked into a song. We know there are realities that transcend science. And still more on the limitations of science. Science can touch upon mysteries, like the mystery of gravity or radiation, but science cannot, according to its own strictures, measure realities like love or music or beauty or goodness, evil, meaning, eternity, God, demons. Now, sometimes this limitation is promoted as a virtue. Some scientists talk about reality, or more likely, some people talk about reality as though what is measurable, what is observable is all there is. But saying that is to superimpose upon reality a constriction that most of the human race has not across our existence. Most of the human race today does not accept, knows to be false. So I say, hey, thank you, science, for what you give us. even though I recognize you cannot give us those elements that we crave most dearly. Yes, science is a blessing, but we recognize it's not finally sufficient for the human heart. It's not sufficient for what it means to be finite, contingent, spiritual. Now, I hope you're still thinking with me, my wonderful friend, but I want to apply those biases about science to the COVID hysteria. For all of his pretense to the contrary, even Dr. Fauci is biased. He's biased that his opinion is finally authoritative.
Now, Ed, that's not even nice.
I know, but think with me. How many times in 15 months have you heard Dr. Fauci discuss external to the CDC experiments, or clinical trials, or alternative medicines, or fascinating alternative explanatory theories? Exactly. He has allowed for hardly any external diverse input on the matter. He has, even for all of his ironic body language and tone, he has been resolute in keeping a tight lid on the C19 narrative. Did he, like a scientist, welcome critique? Or did he spurn that? It's pretty obvious. Spurn. And all of that betrays his own bias. Wow. In the entire arena of science, Dr. Fauci has nothing to learn? He hasn't been curious about other approaches? He doesn't care about different considerations? For me, that is strange. Strange indeed. Or let's frame the matter of bias more broadly. How concerned has Mr. Fauci and the CDC been honestly, sincerely interested in what their proclamations and mandates mean for religious gatherings, for family gatherings, for family life, for the sociological fabric of society, for friendships, for causing depressions, concerning jobs, for mom and pop businesses, sheesh, at all for the economy? Because I've never heard him or them agonize about the bass-ackward effect their social distancing policies might have or could have or did have. None. No agony? Seriously? Not a frigging drop of agony? That's impossible. It's almost a sign of Asperger's syndrome. Would a softball team manager think exclusively of winning this game? Or wouldn't that manager also think about scheduling, practice facility arrangements, team chemistry, esprit de corps, team travel needs? In short, the needs of the team? Who's so characterized by vocational bias that they don't ever think outside the now? It's a weird disconnect. And this COVID nightmare has been the second weirdest national narrative disconnect I've seen in my entire life. Bias. The CDC has been biased, as though the only consideration in a pandemic is epidemiology. Now, actually, thank you truly for your skill, epidemiologists. But disease study and disease control are not all there are in life. There are other concerns like what kinds of government policies increase social disintegration and therefore drug addictions and therefore suicides and therefore depression and therefore crime and therefore imprisonment and there's more to life than epidemiology. And I have watched biased tunnel vision run amok. And that takes me back to our second bias in science. Science believes it can find answers. Let me apply this to the C19 meltdown. Science is about finding answers, not precluding them. If we're truly facing a multi-million person wipeout of society, shouldn't every last possibility, every last angle of attack be considered? Could, could we even imagine a captain saying aloud, "Hey, soldiers, I insist we win this battle today, but you may only use your 9mm pistols. We are going to fight the enemy, and it's true they're in tanks, but we will only engage with those 9mm handguns." No. We'd think a captain like that was nuts. Battles are fought to be won. Well, unless you're fighting for 20 years in Afghanistan, then wars are fought to make billions for the military-industrial complex. Shnikes. It reminds me of that scene in Princess Bride where balding Vizzini, while playing chess with Fezzik the Giant, Vizzini says, "Never get involved in a land war in Asia." Battles are fought to be won. But this viral war has not been waged with raw science, not by our government, not by our politicians, not by the CDC. There's been little experimentation, little out-of-the-box thinking, little willingness to think in novel ways. Instead, cookie-cutter consensus.
Experts say,
Tradition says,
leaders say,
epidemiologists resolutely know. The consensus approach has been stifling, religious. Consensus is not how science is supposed to work, not how a single stride in scientific progress has ever been made. In the church men's Wednesday breakfast group I attend, there's a 70-ish-year-old pediatric neurosurgeon. He says he's never seen such a stifling consensus approach to medicine in his entire life. Well, what he actually said a couple weeks ago was, consensus is killing care for patients innovation. Even 10 years ago, he said, the Treasure Valley was a national leader on out-of-the-box effective patient care. Now, everybody in the valley is doing patient care according to the consensus decisions that are sweeping the industry. It's really stifling, and it's bad for patients, end quote. Now, I think it's amazing that Aldous Huxley saw all this coming back in 1932 between the two world wars. Because in Brave New World, he had Mustafa Mond, one of the future world's 10 controllers, say, quote, "I rather like science. But sometimes science has to be traded for societal happiness. After all, societal happiness is a hard master. It comes at the cost of truth. And truth? Truth is a menace. Science is a public danger. However, when used the right way, our way, science has been beneficent. It has given us the stablest equilibrium in history. But we must control science. We can't allow it to undo its own good work." End quote. 89 years ago. Aldous Huxley saw how science can be a tool of the powers 89 years ago. With the consensus of the powers pushing for the stablest equilibrium in history, science can even box us in. And sadly, consensus killed innovative coronavirus treatment. Again, while we were all being fear-porned into staying in our homes while wearing masks, no public official was openly talking about alternative remedies, treatments, or out-of-the-box considerations for dealing with the Rona. There was one steady consensus response. Social distance and wear a mask. And if you question that narrative, you risked being mocked, canceled, fired. But that's not how science works. True, that is how bureaucracy works, but that's not how science works. Yeah, it's true. Science builds on established tradition, but that tradition is, by the very strictures of science itself, always up for revisitation. There can be no dogmatic holy grails in science. So today's show, all of this, what I'm describing here is what I've been watching for 15, 16 months now. And for me, it's been surreal. Is there a virus? Absolutely. Was it created in a Chinese lab? I don't know, and I don't really care. Because my concern as a Christian theologian has not so much been the science of it all, which we all want to go well. We all want to see the science be true and effective. But my concern has not so much been the science of it all as the cultural response. Tomates, cherry, sagrados. I've been watching the societal freak about the disease. And I believe it's been just so sad, brutal. The American population, already divided along axiological lines, lines about our values, and philosophical lines, lines about what's true, and economic lines, lines about what's important, all of that has been exacerbated, and now we're divided about who's wearing a mask or not. Hatred flowing across social distancing. So sad. Families rent, shameful. Churches closed, unnecessary. Kids forcibly constrained from seeing their classmates, bizarro. But what does all this mean for the church? Opportunity, an opportunity for healing, for mercy, for grace, for the gospel, for truth-telling. There really are things more important, values more important, truths more important than safety. Oh, and oh my me, there's something more important than the consensus, than being liked by the popular woke religious kids. Please, church. Please, pastors, Sunday school teachers, board members, please, worship leaders, youth leaders, please stand for Christ and His gospel. Don't worry about whether the world spirit likes you. Jesus Himself said, "They hated me before they hated you, and they will hate you because they hate me." As my father-in-law Dennis repeatedly said to me during my tenure as a professor, "Ed, it's important to have the right people hate you. It's a badge of honor. It means you're standing for the right things." Stand, of course, with grace and truth. Always grace and truth. But church, please, stand up. There are things worth standing for. Thanks for thinking with me. If you disagree with me, send me an email at uncensoredprofessor@gmail.com. God bless you guys. Thanks again for your support. Please go now and turn your beautiful God-given brains on, everybody.